Welcome one and all. It's time for yet another spicy, tender, succulent, old world battle report. Although maybe it won't be that succulent because Tomb Kings are known for their dryness. They're a little bit desiccated, aren't they? So, obviously a game against Tomb Kings is going to be very useful at the moment since they're one of the two launch factions for the old world, so there's going to be quite a lot of them around. So plenty of bony goodness to be had. And let's have a look at the scenario that's being played. So it's flank attack, and in flank attack you are confined to deploying in the central part of your deployment zone, and then you put aside part of your force and secretly note down which side of the deployment area you're going to put it in, and then after deployment you then unleash all the other units into whichever side you secretly noted. So you could end up with kind of a lopsided battlefield, or you could end up with everything on the same side. This is the terrain setup that we settled on as well. And these are the two armies. So, what do I expect to be an issue against Tomb Kings? Obviously, they're undead, so they're going to have some magic, they're going to have big flying monster. And this particular list has a lot of chariots in it. So, do I think that would be an issue for my army? Because actually, chariots and knights are some of the things that I look at, and I think this is going to be a very tasty evening here for the dwarf guns, because got a nice amount of AP on the ranged weaponry for the dwarves, and units that rely on their armor save, like for example knights, who have good armor, and if you can punch through it, they don't just tend to have that many wounds. So chariots are in a similar boat, but being undead, they do have other save options as well. They generally have regeneration saves. However, flaming attacks can put a stop to that, so the likes of Iron Drakes with the flaming attacks, very useful. And this picture was taken after the Vanguard and Scout positions have been taken up as well. Who is in the chat here? We've got John, we've got Mithridas, we've got Mikhail, and we've got Tomb King Tristan. That is definitely a name worthy of a Tomb King. So, let's go through my list first of all. We have Dwarf Warriors and Ironbreakers as the main combat fighter units. If you've been following my battle reports, you'll have seen in the last list that I had, just from the overview, another unit of Hammerers, and that's gone, because I felt the balance was swayed slightly too more towards combat, so I've tweaked it back a little bit in favour of shooting. So these are the two main fighting units. We've got 16 Ironbreakers and 18 Dwarf Warriors. The Dwarf Warriors have been joined by the BSB, who is a Thane, and the Thane has been given a shield and a single rune, which is one rune of stone, which allows a reroll of an armor save, just because I had some points left over. No fancy banner. The Ironbreakers have been joined by a runesmith, the runesmith who has 3 runes of spell breaking, which auto dispel. Obviously, the issue is with a runesmith is that they have a shorter dispel range than some of the others. But it's going to be moving a bit anyway because it's in my main fighting unit. And generally, enemy spells, the most dangerous ones, some lists are obviously exceptions to this, but often the most dangerous spells want to get fairly close to you anyway. So I don't mind the shorter dispel range. And there's a king in there as well. And the king has a lot of runes piled up on him. So he's got a shield, very exciting. Armor runes, 3 runes of shielding, so he's got a 4+ ward save. Talismanic runes, he's got the rune of passage, so the unit can move through terrain, should that be an issue, but looking at the table it doesn't look like that's going to really come up. And then weapon runes, Master Rune of Alaric the Mad, so no armor saves allowed against the King's weapon. Rune of Speed, one of those, which gives +1 initiative, and Rune of Might, which gives +1 strength, so he's going to be coming in at strength 5, with initiative 5 as well, and then not allowing armor saves with those 4 attacks, and very likely to be hitting on 3s against almost everything with weapon skill 7, so it's going to be spicy. Probably even hitting on 2s against... Can you even hit on 2s if you're twice as... if you're more than double? Does that apply to weapon skill as well? I suppose I could just look right now, couldn't I? Because I've got the quick reference sheet here with my rulebook. Let's have a look at that right now. So, the to-hit chart, weapon skill versus weapon skill. Yeah, you can get down to 2s. And it is as I suspected, so if your weapon skill is more than double the opponent's, then you hit on 2s. So a king with weapon skill 7, I think a skeleton is weapon skill 3. So, yeah, there you go. Could be hitting on 2s against skeletons, so that would be very exciting, wouldn't it? We've got a couple of organ guns, and I'm building up to the triple organ gun list because I'm painting the 80s organ gun with all the spikes on it. So I'll have one from each era represented. I don't know if it's particularly optimal, and it also limits how many iron drakes you can take because they're competing for the rare section. But it would be cool just to have 3 organ guns in a list. And at that point it might become worth investing in an engineer as well, to mitigate the on average 1 misfire that you'll get per turn from 3 organ guns. Behind the organ guns we've got 8 hammerers who are drilled so that they can change their formation a little bit and then charge through any gaps that might appear. Got 5 thunderers, a bolt thrower and a cannon. No runes on those, just keeping them cheap. Gyrocopter with a steam gun, 16 rangers with great weapons, crossbows, throwing axes and a command. So throwing axes obviously good for short range stand and shoot. And there are 7 iron drakes with a trollhammer torpedo. So small unit of iron drakes. Onto the opposing army. Actually, before that, so let me go back to the wide shot here. So, my main thinking is that my shooting is going to be protected by the rangers on this side, my big fighting units on this side, iron drakes holding down this flank, and then the hammerers aiming to plug any gaps in the defences that pop up. So if anything juicy gets into my lines, the hammerers are going to be tasked with charging in and delivering a bit of a counter-strike. The gyrocopter is going to have a more interesting role in this battle, which is based on the opposing army list, and you'll see as I go over that in a moment. My flank force, I chose my cannon because the border of the flank section went right up to here, partially on the hill. So the cannon was able to be deployed on the hill despite being part of the flank force, and the gyrocopter was part of it as well. So just those 2 units. My opponent, I think, just picked 1 unit of chariots and then just stuck them over there. So we haven't made massive use of the scenario, but it does allow you to fit more frontage across the battlefield, because in that small area you are confined, especially if you've got a wide army like Tomb King chariots. So, Tomb Kings, unit of chariots, 4 of them, 4 more chariots. Settra, who is quite powerful but is not a huge spellcaster, so is only level 1, but has various other abilities that go off on like leadership tests for some healing, and there's an extra movement ability as well. So some abilities aren't tied to being spells, which is useful because I'm not going to be able to stop them. But it is a level 1 spellcaster, so not going to be a particularly magic heavy game. There is a big blob of skeletons, which is mixed spears and shields with bows. So that means that the bows can still do a little bit of shooting from the back, and Tomb King bows always have been this way. They can always hit on 5s regardless of any modifiers, so very easy to remember, and you don't have to worry about any other factors with them. So they've got some bows in there, and they've got some fighty ones at the front. So we're going to probably see more people doing this kind of thing with certain units where this is an option, where you've got different weapon options, because you can get the benefits of one and mitigate the weaknesses as well. So for example, in this unit, normally skeleton archers, you wouldn't necessarily have shields or maybe light armor. Maybe the spears have light armor and the archers don't, something like that. So you're going to be able to get the benefit as long as you, I think, take them away 1 from each bit at a time. It's some very complicated system that I haven't dabbled in yet with mixed unit types with different weapons, but it is a thing you can do. And there are ways to make it work. Actually, in my last game, someone did it with the Black Orcs as well. They had some of the unit with great weapons and some of them not with great weapons. So some of them were going to be able to strike first, and some of them would be the hard hitters going last. And you just have to be careful what order you take them away in, because certain rules require you to have the majority with that upgrade in order to benefit from it. So, Loads of skeletons, more chariots, and there is a bone dragon, which you think from here it impressively fits on its base, but actually the tail goes off about 3 feet to the back, so it doesn't fit on its base anywhere near. And 3 tomb scorpions who are ambushing, and this brings me to the gyrocopter. But we've got some close-ups first. Some nice skeleton action, nice chariot action, and some cinematic over-the-shoulder dwarf artillery crew shots. Where's this bolt thrower going to be fired? I'm thinking into a line of chariots, maybe all the way over there. Could punch through those. And the cannon, maybe the same thing. Thunderers. And over the top of the iron breakers there with the king visible. And look at that. Look at that cinematic action. Over to the enemies. So, let me quickly go back to the wide shot and tell you what the gyrocopter's doing. So scouts have to come in, or ambushers, should I say, have to come in more than 8 inches away from the enemy. So at the back of my lines, there are some gaps. And there's possible space down here, over here, and over here, where they could potentially come in. So the gyrocopter is going to be taking a defensive role in this game. I don't see any other reason for it to go forward, because the only units it could engage with would ultimately kill it quite easily, I think, which is pretty much all of them. And it would not be skeletons, for example, and dropping a flame template on skeletons isn't that big of a deal, because there's loads of them. So I'm thinking it's going to patrol the back and wait to see if any scorpions appear, and then potentially charge them, or get in the way, or flame them, or also just stop them deploying by being in that spot that they want to land in. So that's the role for the gyrocopter. The ranger's role is to obviously kill this unit. And they're angled so that if they do manage to get rid of those guys first, then they can still get involved in the game from there, and they're protecting my 2 war machines on the hill. These 2 units of chariots, this one is obviously primed to be blasted to smithereens by 2 organ guns, and then this one is going straight for the iron drakes. So we'll see if we can take them out. The big flyer is hiding a bit at the back. That's obviously a big concern. It's got a lot of wounds, it's got a lot of saves. So we shall see. And obviously one thing to remember with any undead army, when the general gets killed, there's going to be some crumbling. So let's go into turn 1. And the dwarves do get turn 1. So firing off some crossbows, take out a chariot. Firing off a cannon and a bolt thrower, take out another chariot. This one on the right. Firing the iron drakes. They don't hit anything, so there's a picture of the floor. Then organ gun number 1 rolls 20 shots, which is obviously the highest you can get. And the other one rolls 8 and a misfire, so it's going to be 8 shots with -1 to hit, but still 20 shots. It's pretty tasty. And with that, whittle down 2 chariots from the middle unit and put wounds onto the other one as well. So it's looking pretty good so far. I've done a bit of repositioning. The iron breakers have moved up a little bit. If anyone's going to get charged, I would rather it be them. Because I actually forgot to mention the iron breakers do actually have a rune on their banner, which is... it is the rune of... where do I put it? There we go. It's the rune of confusion. So the rune of confusion is the one that means you make disordered charges against them. So that means you don't get your initiative bonus, which is going to be quite a big deal for skeletons who don't have very good initiative, and they'll be relying on that charge initiative bonus to be going first against dwarves. Especially iron breakers with a king in there, so they'd be, I think they're initiative 2, most skeletons, same as an iron breaker, so they'd be fighting simultaneously. But the king and the runesmith would be able to go first, and the king has a lot of hitting power, as established earlier. We've got Brewing with Greg in the chat, who is talking about Slayers. You've run mixed Slayers, and yeah, got to pay attention. Yes, if you're taking units that are mixed in some way, got to pay attention to casualty removal, because there are some very specific rules you've got to keep your eye on there. So, I'd say that's quite a successful first turn, whittled them down. This Tomb King army does not particularly have a huge amount of healing potential. It's pretty much just going to be a wound or a few wounds comes back to a unit. There are no spells that are going to target and bring back chariots, for example. So, I'm very confident here. I think if these 3 chariots charge into the rangers, the stand and shoot is going to be quite good. That's going to do a few more wounds. they may well take a wound charging into the difficult terrain. That's very possible. These ones are quite far out, so they might not even make a charge yet. The Flyer's too far away to charge. Settra probably can't charge anything yet. Quite far away as well. Skeleton's definitely too far away. So I may well get another full round of shooting here. Apart from this unit, obviously. But I'm confident the Rangers, with their great weapons as well, I could kill one of them on the way in. Only 2 chariots hitting. They're not going to kill that many Rangers, surely. And then hitting them back with the great weapons, I think, would be quite painful. And just the wounds dished out from stand and shoot, I think, could help combat resolution as well. So I could end up beating them on combat res. Turn 1 for the Tomb Kings. There is a charge declared here. There is a charge declared from the middle chariots. And as predicted, they do manage to lose 1 on the way in. And the central unit fails its charge. So it was quite far. I think it was going for the organ guns, actually. It was charging both of them at the same time because they're level with each other. But it couldn't quite roll high enough, so he just trundled forward a little bit. And this one, after losing a model, decides, I'm just going to go out of the way here and just circle round the back of your army instead of charging straight into the Iron Drakes, which might not end well, especially with other dwarves nearby. And they've also left space so the big Bone Dragon can land right here as well. Now, it's worth noting that the Tomb King units, most of them can't march, but a lot of them have reserve move, so it doesn't matter that they can't march because they can move twice anyway. In the middle, Settra shuffles up a bit, and when the chariots make their reserve move, they're then able to get even further round the side here. And let's see how combat goes. Well, a couple of Rangers dead, and then the Rangers just whomp the chariots to death with their great weapons. So that's good. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the upgrade on the Rangers, because I just take it every time now. Seems like an auto-include. I always give the Rangers the Rune of Courage, just so they can automatically pass any fear or terror tests, because they're out miles away from anyone else, often, and if they were to fail a terror test against the kind of thing they want to charge them, like a big monster, then that wouldn't be great. They want to be there to stand and shoot and then hit it with their great weapons, so that seems like an auto-take upgrade, the way I use the Rangers, just 15 points for that. So, Rangers doing some great work there, not many casualties taken, and they're going to be able to start shooting away at Settra next, who does have a better save than the chariots, I think. And you can see with the reserve move, these ones have got right up in my face now, so I'm going to have to organ gun them to death. So, what is my plan for this turn? Well, I'm going to fire as much as I can at whatever I can, so the Rangers can only shoot Settra. War Machines on the hill could shoot this unit here, or they could shoot the Bone Dragon, which is a large target, so they can see over all of my troops, even if they weren't on a hill. And the Iron Drakes will have to shoot the Bone Dragon. 2 organ guns. Well, the organ guns could technically shoot the Bone Dragon as well, because that's a large target. This one could shoot Settra through there. Or they could blast away at this unit here. Or the Iron Breakers could charge that unit, and then I would be free to use my weapons on other units. So let's see what I do. The Rangers and the Thunderers put 5 wounds onto Settra, which is really good. The Iron Breakers murder the 2 chariots that they charge into the flank of, but they then fail their leadership test and have to then overrun. So they're stuck facing the wrong way now. And that's unfortunate. You can see that my Iron Drakes didn't do too much. I don't know if the Bone Dragon's taken any wounds. I think one of the organ guns did fire at Settra as well, which explains some of the extra wounds, and this one fired at the Bone Dragon and failed to do anything. So I'm not too worried about the Iron Breakers here, because what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to get charged by skeletons. That's not going to be a great time for the skeletons. Turn 2 for the Tomb Kings. So Settra gets a wound back. The Bone Dragon decides to charge at the Iron Drakes, who fail their terror test, and they flee through the Dwarf Warriors, and then the Bone Dragon redirects the charge into them. So I've got my BSB in there, I've got a champion, so there is potential for challenges to be issued there to keep my rank bonus intact. The Skeletons fail their charge into the Iron Breakers. Now if we go back, it doesn't actually look like it's that far, but they're not perfectly aligned with the Iron Breakers, so in order to touch them, they have to actually wheel round an inch or two first and then come down here and touch. So they failed their charge. So they're just stuck out in no man's land. Then a couple of tomb scorpions successfully come in. They've come in the bottom left of the battlefield. I'll show you that in a second. And Settra makes a charge into the rangers and takes another wound, I think, from stand and shoot. And you can see where the tomb scorpions go now in the remaining moves. Once they've come in, they can still move, so they're going towards my war machines. So the cannon is going to have to try and grape shot one of them to death, and the gyrocopter is going to have to do something about the other. The chariot unit on the right is continuing its evasive manoeuvre around this giant piece of terrain, working its way around the back of my forces, and looking very menacing, especially to iron drakes that are currently fleeing. And let's go into combat. So the dwarf champion and the bone dragon get into a fight, and that results in lots of casualties, and the dwarves they do take a ton of wounds and just about lose the combat by 1 or 2, I think. Not much, because I've got BSB and I've got some ranks, and all they do is give ground a little bit. So I think I would have had to fall back in good order, but they have shield wall, which means that rather than falling back in good order, you can give ground. Because if they had to fall back in good order in this position, then they would probably fall back through the iron drakes and end up off the table. So they just give ground instead. And what's this? The rangers have murdered Settra. So Settra did not do too much in combat, 5 casualties, and then the remaining rangers got their great weapons out and just sliced Settra's head off, and the heads off all the horses pulling the chariot as well. And then they overran, because they failed their leadership test and had to, which meant that some of them, or I think just a couple actually, died from dangerous terrain. And the rangers probably have move through cover, don't they? Let's have a look at how that rule is worded. Do they even have it? Yes, they do. So they don't suffer any modifiers to their movement for moving through terrain, and they may re-roll any 1s. I think I forgot to do that, but I think only 2 died anyway. The skeletons hanging out, taking casualties. Because Settra's dead now, this is crumbling, so the skeletons are starting to crumble, and everyone else is just about okay for now. So I'm going to have a good round of shooting, and then at the start of every Tomb King turn now, they're going to be crumbling away slowly. So especially if they've got low leadership, like skeletons are going to take a lot of casualties from that. Units like Tomb Scorpions actually have quite good leadership, so they're probably not going to crumble quite so much. Yes, Rangers for the win. They are definitely the MVPs at the moment. So looking very good for the Dwarves, especially a couple of unlucky leadership rolls, and this whole Tomb King army could crumble into dust. As it should. So on to my turn now. Now, it should be pointed out before this turn that I haven't actually examined the profile of a Tomb Scorpion. So I'm thinking Gyrocopter, charge into the Tomb Scorpion, and will probably be stuck in a combat for a turn, because I'm sure it doesn't have that many attacks. We'll see if that turns out to be correct or not, as a battle plan. So, this Tomb Scorpion takes a couple of wounds from the grape shot of the cannon on the hill. I don't bother turning it around to show its way it's shooting normally, because I think in this instance the extra weight on the front of the cannon might have knocked it over the edge of the hill anyway. But I always leave enough space so that it can pivot all the way around. What I'm actually thinking of doing, I may do this at some point, is getting a round base for the square base to slot into. Just so I keep all my war machines exactly far enough apart so that there's never any issue with them spinning, so I don't have to bother pivoting them round. Because they do get a free turn anyway. So just putting them inside a circle means that you won't accidentally put another unit too close to them and stop them rotating. If that makes sense to anybody out there. The Gyrocopter charges into this Tomb Scorpion and gets whooped. And it then overruns, so it's in a good position to charge my other war machines now. So that was a bad idea. So I probably should have done with the Gyrocopter. Well, other than just looking at the Tomb Scorpion stats, is just parked the Gyro in front of it to block it for a turn. And my hammerers have repositioned themselves a little bit. My Iron Breakers have turned round to face the big threat, which is coming from the other side. I kill another chariot with the Iron Drakes. However, my Dwarf Warriors then... I think my BSB took the challenge on, just because I wanted to keep my rank bonus intact for the turn. So the BSB got killed, and then they just failed their leadership. And they ran off the table and died. And then the Bone Dragon went into the flank of the Iron Drakes, so that's sad. Yeah, because the Iron Drakes did rally, of course. So it's still looking pretty good, but Tomb Scorpions are in dangerous positions now, and they're about to charge. And this Bone Dragon is a lot of points, and that I'm definitely not anywhere close to killing that. Skeletons are probably going to crumble over the course of the game. The Chariots probably will. Tomb Scorpions maybe won't, although it only takes one unlucky roll, because they only have about 3 wounds. Turn 3 for the Tomb Kings. So, you'll notice that there used to be a Scorpion there, and now it's gone. So that one crumbled away. A Chariot crumbled away as well. And several Skeletons did. So, oh yeah, there's the casualties from last turn piled up in the corner there. The final Chariot charges into the front of the Iron Drakes. I can't stand a duke because they're already in combat. And the Skeletons decide they're going to charge into the Iron Breakers while they can. Normally, Skeletons versus Iron Breakers is probably a very bad matchup for the Skeletons because Iron Breakers are just a better grindy unit. If the Skeletons aren't being healed, then the Iron Breakers are just much more survivable and hit harder. And there's some characters in there as well. But when you're crumbling, you kind of have to just go and do what you can while you're still alive, because it could only be another few turns of them losing 5+ models a turn and just sitting there rotting away. So they might as well get something done now before they're too weak and feeble. Tomb Scorpion into the Organ Gun. I decided not to flee with the Organ Gun because if we go back and look at the angle involved here, so it charged into this one. If I fled the Organ Gun, it would flee in this sort of direction and possibly end up bouncing through the Iron Breakers here, which would mean that when the Skeletons charge the Iron Breakers, they would accidentally touch the Organ Gun, kill it, and then stop, I believe is the correct way to play it. So that would get the Organ Gun killed anyway. And I would rather the Skeletons do charge the Iron Breakers because I can kill them faster and then focus on the dragon. So if the Organ Gun's going to die, it might as well happen here, because even if it does flee, it would still die, and then the Scorpion would redirect its charge into the next Organ Gun, which I don't want, so I'm just going to hold there. And onward we go. So after combat, the Iron Drakes are obviously killed, and the Chariot overruns into the Hammerers, and the Bone Dragon is just rotating menacingly, so I'm going to have one go at shooting that probably. The Organ Gun. So, after combat, the Organ Gun falls back in good order, so it does not break, and it ends up going through the Organ Gun number 2 and the Hammerers and ends up here. Obviously, if war machines break in combat, they just die. So, falls back and it lands here, and this is such a weird rule, the fact that it doesn't have to rally, because it's not actually fleeing, it just fell back in good order, which means that it doesn't count as moving next turn, so it can just shoot from this position. So the one crewman has just weaved it through my troops, but while doing this is also loading all 5 barrels, and then in my turn is then going to just unleash it at point blank range into the Bone Dragon. Oh yeah, I should point out as well, the Bone Dragon, an interesting aspect of that is that because of the dust cloud around it, it's -1 to hit with shooting, which is why probably I haven't done much to it yet. And there's an interesting cannon situation coming up as well because of angles, which we'll get to shortly. And you can see that some more Skeletons have been whittled down there. And even more now. So after combat, the Iron Breaks obviously win by a lot, and then loads of Skeletons disappear. And yes, I think that was a premature picture actually. So in the next turn, the Tomb Scorpion does kill the Organ Gun there. I've got my Hammerers fighting the Chariots. The Iron Breakers are doing a great job on the Skeletons. The Thunderers have turned round to shoot. And I didn't do that much to the Bone Dragon, unfortunately, in this turn. And look at that, though. Loads of dead Skeletons. They are not going to last much longer. I think I've done 2 wounds to the Bone Dragon there, so woo. And yes, we're about to be charged by another Tomb Scorpion up on the hill. And there's not much left in the game in general. I've got a big expensive unit here, my opponent has a big expensive unit there. This chariot and the skeletons are definitely not going to survive the game. They're certainly going to crumble. This Tomb Scorpion has taken a wound, so that could definitely crumble as well. On average it shouldn't, because it's got decent leadership. My Rangers are out of harm's way. War Machines not exactly out of harm's way yet. There is another Tomb Scorpion that hasn't entered yet, by the way. On to turn 4 for the Tomb Kings. And you'll see here that the chariot has crumbled. Everyone else seems to be fine, not worrying about the effects of crumble at all. And a charge into the organ gun from the Bone Dragon. Tomb Scorpion into the Thunderers. And that's it for the turn. So 2 Thunderers managed to hold against the Tomb Scorpion, which is good, gives it another chance to crumble next turn, and keeps my War Machines free for a turn to shoot at the Bone Dragon. So I'm just going to unleash everything I've got into that thing. Or do I double charge it? So, the hammers are actually facing this way, so they can't see it right now. However, they are drilled. And, ooh, I've just remembered I didn't tell you about the interesting cannon situation. I'll go back to that in a sec. So, because the hammerers are drilled, they can add to their front rank. So all they need to do is add 1 guy to the front rank here, and now they can see the Bone Dragon. Now, as far as I'm aware, that's the correct way to do it. If it is the case of you have to declare the charge on something you can see before you do the maneuver, then it's actually not legal. So if anyone is fully up on that part of the rules is in the chat, then let me know. Is it legal to expand your ranks with drilled and then declare a charge based on your new arc of sight? Because that's how I've been playing it. Now I'll go back and describe that cannon situation for you from the last turn. So we were in a situation like this, and I want to hit the Bone Dragon, and I've got an organ gun there. So in order for me to hit, I'm going to have to shoot in a very specific line here. So I can't target the optimal part of the Bone Dragon, which is there, and just say 10 from the back, because that would put it here and potentially would hit the organ gun, which makes it illegal. So I have to cut across a narrower section of the Bone Dragon base and hope for a favourable roll and bounce in order to hit it. And I did actually hit it. So there you go. Very exciting. So, my turn 5. Bone Dragon gets through the final Thunderers. And I do loads of shooting. And, hold on, let me go back. I think I actually charge the Bone Dragon in my turn 5, and then I end up losing combat. So both units fall back in good order. And the reason they've gone in weird directions, I believe this is the correct way of doing it. You move away on a unit by unit basis. So they would have been obviously aligned against the front of the dragon. And I believe that if they both fall back in good order, they go from the centre point of the enemy unit backwards their own way. They wouldn't just go back in an organised line. If that's not correct, then let me know as well. That would be an interesting one, if you do have to fall back in a long straight line, if you've got multiple units all falling back at the same time. And yes, I'm a bit more concerned, but not particularly, because I think the Ironbreakers will easily hold out for a turn if they're charged by the Bone Dragon. I'm more concerned about the Hammerers. They're just going to be easy points to gobble up. And looking back here, what I'm thinking is, I could have just charged in the Ironbreakers, or I could have redressed their ranks rather than doing a charge. I could have just done a reform and made them 4 wide, added more ranks, so that if they do eventually get charged, I'll have some good static combat resolution for the various challenges that will be made. I'd throw away the unit champion first, and then, if there is another challenge, maybe the Runesmith would be worth sacrificing for a round of combat against the Bone Dragon to keep the Ironbreakers alive, because they're quite expensive. But I end up throwing everyone in, because I thought, you know what, I don't care about being optimal, I want to kill a Bone Dragon, so that's why both units charged in. Unfortunately, I didn't do much, despite all the Hammerers. Most of the Hammerers actually got killed by a stomp at the end of combat. So, into the next turn, the Iron Breakers get charged by the Bone Dragon, Tomb Scorpion charges into the Bolt Thrower, and what's this? The Iron Breakers are dead? Well, I did sacrifice a unit champion, I think, and unfortunately, I've just failed my leadership test. I rolled stupendously high with the official Old World dice for the leadership test, and ran away and got killed by the dragon. Wow, wow, wow. I didn't actually lose combat by that much. I think I only lost by 1 or maybe 2 points. But still, fled, because of course the BSB was in the warrior unit, and he's dead. So that's unfortunate. The Bolt Thrower dies as well, Cannon still hanging on, and then it dies in the next turn. So, after that, we end up having one more round at the end of the game with the Bone Dragon and the Scorpion going after the Rangers, but they don't manage to kill them, and I've still got some Hammerers left as well. So we both have 2 units left, but the Bone Dragon is quite expensive, so I think it would come out, it would shake out as a narrow win for the Tomb Kings in a tournament setting. So, because the Rangers are nearly 300 points as a unit, so that's some good pointage, and the Hammerers are 136 points as well. So it would be a very narrow win for the Tomb Kings in a tournament setting. If it were a tournament setting, I think a couple of things would have been done differently. There would have been more of an effort made to deny points rather than trying to murder. Because the Iron Breakers with a King, let's see how many points that unit was. So the King and the Runesmith together are about 400 points, and the Iron Breakers are about 300. So that unit is more expensive than the Bone Dragon. So keeping that unit alive is more important than killing a Bone Dragon. So obviously, as I was describing with the reforming and changing the ranks to get more static combat resolution, that's something that could have been done there to keep that unit alive, but I was just eager to try and kill the Bone Dragon, so charged everything in and tried to murder as much as possible. The Tomb Kings, in a tournament setting, would they have done anything different? There were a couple of charges that were made into shooting units with a good stand and shoot. So I'm not sure whether they would have done a couple of things different. Charging headlong straight into the unit of 16 Rangers with their stand and shoot and their great weapons. Generally not going to end well unless you're extremely hard hitting and maybe multiple units at once, because I'm deploying them in that long line, so they're asking to be multi-charged. In the last tournament actually against Bretonians, I think it was 2 flying characters and some Pegasus Knights all charged into them at once, which is enough to kill them before they can hit back. So generally you do need multiple units to get through enough of them, because they're getting the combat resolution from the stand and shoot, and then the great weapons when they hit you back are going to be good enough to do some serious damage to most things. OGCC is loving these battle reports. Keep them coming. I will keep them coming, probably about 1 a week for a while at least, because that's what I've been playing mostly at the local club night on Thursdays, and then doing most of the reports on Fridays. I won't always be playing Old World, so some weeks there won't be an Old World battle report, but there should be some kind of battle report nearly every week, and there'll probably be a bit of Age of Sigmar when that comes out, because that new edition's about to hit, so I'll obviously be diving back on that as well. But there is an Old World tournament coming up in about a week's time, so I'm going to continue tweaking this list. I'm going to try and get the 3rd organ gun painted, and I think the cannon comes out. I don't think that's particularly optimal, and then I just have to drop a couple of upgrades then to make it fit. Other than that, that just works as a points level. Everything else, I'm fairly happy with that list actually. I think the Iron Breakers are really good. I think I got a bit unlucky with the leadership test, and I could have used them a bit more cleverly as well at the end there, and tweaked their formation a little bit. I'm also pondering just making the Iron Breakers drilled as well, because I think it's just a really strong ability, and you don't want to have the choice of getting in an optimal formation or charging. That's not a choice you want to make. You want to just do both. So having drilled allows you to do that, and for the whole unit it would only cost me 16 points. So I think that's going to be a worthy investment, and that's going to hopefully get them some more action and some more favourable action. The Dwarf Warrior unit, obviously they're making up core, and I like having the extra fighter unit. I think I was too gun heavy in previous lists,
Greg says, I drill with all my dwarves now. It is amazing. Yes, it is. Let's see. Who can't be drilled? Let me have a look. So you can drill warriors as well. Is there anyone that you can't put drilled on? I'm going to assume you can't drill rangers because they're just not that kind of unit. Let's see. Now, you can't drill them, but that would be wild. How about thunderers? No, there's no drilled option for them. So it seems like all the close combat infantry units, not the shooty infantry units, is how it's looking here. So the other thing I'm looking at actually is the unit of 5 thunderers. I quite liked how they've performed actually. They do a good little job for 50 points. And it's a job that you would probably want to be filled by something like a bolt thrower, but that's not core obviously. I could take a small unit of quarrelers instead to give me the extra range, especially if I'm dropping the cannon and bringing an organ gun in. The range of the army goes down a little bit, so I could push that range up again by removing the thunderers and adding quarrelers. There's no real huge difference between them. The main thing is just the extra 6 inches of range for the quarrelers, and the thunderers have a point of AP and don't rely so much on the armor bane to get through armor. Mithridas says iron drakes can be drilled. That's an interesting one. Yes, that is very interesting actually, because they're not at all bad in combat, iron drakes, with weapon skill 4, and they have full plate armor as well, and strength 4. So they are decent at fighting. They don't have any AP on their hand weapons, but if you're thinking of getting them into combat, you're generally going to be charged, because then you can do your stand and shoot. And Cinderblast bombs I generally miss when I don't have them. In this game it didn't really matter because they failed their terror test and ran away regardless. But I like the Cinderblast bombs, so that's something I'm going to try and make space for. But you've got to make sacrifices to fit all these things in. The unit of 8 hammerers is a weird one. I like them in their role as war machine guards. It didn't particularly come up in this game because things only got into my war machines once they'd already gone off on another task. So maybe I could have been more disciplined with the hammerers instead of thinking I'm going to go and murder a bone dragon with them because their weapons are just really nasty. Let's get in there and just whomp some bone. Instead, maybe I could have used them to protect the flank against the tomb scorpions. I'm sure the hammerers would have had a nice time whomping a tomb scorpion. Mithridas, what do you think about detachment for the drakes? Well, the issue with the detachment is that you can't take command models in it, so that you can't have the Trollhammer torpedo, which is one of the selling points of the Iron Drakes. So I don't know. It's definitely not a bad option, but I think the issue is just the lack of the Trollhammer. And if you take them as a detachment, do they still come under the rare section, or would they come under something else if they're a detachment? I'm going to assume they do, otherwise that would be a bit of a large loophole. So yes, 1 week to go. I am playing in a tournament tomorrow, but it's not Old World, it's Dreadball, which is the Mantic sci-fi sports board game where I play the Z's, who are genetically modified monkey clones, whose thing is that they can swamp the pitch with an illegal amount of players, and they're really good at the referee not noticing them because they all look the same because they're clones. So that's what I'm doing this weekend. And then probably another practice Old World game next Thursday, and then the tournament at the weekend. I think it's the UK Games Expo next weekend as well. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go to that. If I do go, it would only be on the Friday because I've got a tournament. And yes, so all in all, I think Tomb Kings, this non-magic Tomb Kings list, I didn't really mention the magic at all because there was only one attempted spell, or two actually. One of them was really far away, and the one that was attempted and was succeeded with, I just stopped it with my Rune of Spellbreaking because I had 3 of them and there was only 1 spell being cast per turn. So there you go, not much magic-wise, but it was a fun list actually. The chariots are quite fun. And a good target for my shooting, of course. The Bone Dragon. Yeah, these kind of units where they have multiple layers of saves, and they can fly, and they've got loads of wounds, and they can dish out punishment, are still the bane of my existence. And I haven't found a perfect counter for them yet.
because the Dwarf War Machines aren't doing a high enough number of guaranteed wounds. Even if you look at the Bolt Thrower, which just as a guaranteed flat 2 wounds, even to hit with a Bolt Thrower is challenging, especially against a Bone Dragon, which is -1 to hit against it. See, Armando says, when do you think we shall see the Arcane Journal? Well, I'm going to assume that they don't want to overshadow or compete with the Age of Sigmar release, which I think is coming mid-June. Is that right for the Age of Sigmar box pre-orders mid-June? That sounds about right based on how they've been hyping all that stuff up. So I would guess that maybe a couple of weeks after that the Dwarves should go up for pre-order. Surely they're not going to make us wait longer than that for the Dwarves. So I'm hoping that we're going to have Dwarves in our hands in July. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Although maybe I'm just being optimistic there. And what do you think we'll see in the Arcane Journal? I think we'll see... Well, we know that there are things like the Goblin Hewer and some of the special characters. And hopefully we can have a competitive Slayer army that isn't just purely a Slayer army. I don't want to have to buy 1,000,000 Slayers. I would like to have a unit or 2 of them. I don't want to have to buy full 2,000 points of Slayers just to make them usable. I would like them to be usable in the regular army. And what else do we need? I think the War Machines need something. Maybe if they just give us more runes in the Arcane Journal. That would be exciting. Maybe not necessarily runes, maybe different ways of using runes. I don't know, don't think they would allow them on the organ guns still. Maybe change the points for some of the runes based on taking certain themed armies. You can have certain combos of runes for cheaper, like 2-for-1 deals on runes. Something like that would be nice. Maybe a legendary dwarf engineer who, get this crazy idea, he can use his ballistic skill with a war machine, like the Empire engineers can. Wouldn't that be ridiculous? It wouldn't be ridiculous, but it would be very powerful. So I think if the dwarf engineer could use his ballistic skill on an organ gun, that would be insanely good. So maybe we'll get a legendary dwarf engineer. Armando says Rune of Accuracy. Yes, that is one thing that's lacking, isn't it? And what else could we see? Yes, Ballistic Skill 5 Organ Gun would be insanely good. The Taunt rune. Yes, the rune... Yeah, how would that work now? You could have a rune on a banner, probably, and enemies who can declare a charge against it would be considered like frenzied or impetuous and would have to charge, maybe. That would be cool. And then you could obviously combo that with some of the other runes that take away charge bonuses. Yeah, so that would be a lot of fun, actually. Yeah, more runes, more usable units, themed army lists, and just more versatility. Because I want blocks of troops like this, the Ironbreakers with heroes in, to be good. Against some lists, the enemy just don't have to come near you, though. There are lists that can stay out of range of the fighty stuff, not be under too much threat from you shooting, and then drop a vortex in front of you, for instance. They can be far enough out of organ gun range, for instance, and still get like extended spell ranges, things like that. There are armies that can do that. And yeah, I would like different playstyles available to the dwarves other than load up with guns to make the enemy walk towards you. Something for miners as well. I don't think they're very good at the moment. They could do with something. All these units that aren't that powerful could be drastically changed with the availability of runes. So if the miners could take a rune on their banner that gave them some kind of buff, not necessarily they can charge on the turn they come in, because that wouldn't actually be that powerful for a dwarf, because you have to come in more than 8 inches away from the enemy. So what are the chances you would actually make that charge anyway? Very slim. So that wouldn't be overpowered. That would be fun and threatening. So that would be kind of cool, actually. And what other units are very, very weak and could do with something to give them an extra ability? Slayers, definitely, but we know Slayers are going to get some attention because there's some new units coming in the book. So that's going to be fun. And also, I'm going to be buying more gyrocopters when the book comes out as well. So I'm going to be able to not only run these fun a million gun lists, but also maybe more competitive lists that have more gyrocopters in them, which seem to be the competitive choice along with Iron Drakes. And Rangers, obviously. If I could fill up my entire core with 40 Rangers, I don't know whether I would, because 40 Rangers in a unit is a lot of points invested in one block. And if someone casts that spell that makes you take a leadership test or run away, and you fail it, and they're fleeing, and then maybe someone touches them and they all die, that's 500 points gone. So it's sad that you can only have one unit in core. I wonder how powerful it would be to have a list where you fill up your entire core section and rare section with Rangers. So you could have 1,000 points of Rangers, and at least one of the units would have to be massive though. For the core requirement, you can only take one. So it's probably, how many Rangers would that be? Probably at least 30 in a unit. And that would fill up the whole core section. And then, in rare, would you take 2 smaller units in rare? Let's say 2 units of round about 15-ish. It depends what upgrades you put on them and whether you give them all command and whatnot. But if you're fully kitting them out, they do get quite expensive with all the different weapon options they have. So you could have 1 massive unit of Rangers, 2 medium-sized unit of Rangers. And I say medium, but they're still quite large, like 15 or more models is quite large for a dwarf army in the old world. So you could have tons of Rangers and plop them right in front of the enemy and start blasting. I don't know how competitive it would be, but there are certain armies that would certainly struggle with that. So it's about time to wrap this one up. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description. There are various social media shenanigans down there. There's the Discord server, where you can keep an eye on all the latest stuff, and there's an old world section in there. There's Facebook, there is Twitter on there as well, and obviously if you want to keep this channel churning out endless non-stop battle reports in just a torrent of tactical goodness, fresh straight to your computer or mobile device, then why not pledge a percentage of your life savings, or indeed your entire life savings, via Patreon or PayPal, which is going to pay for me to attend more tournaments and buy lots of gyrocopters. And on that note, time to wrap up. So let's have a look. Before we go, I'll have one final look at the chat. Armando says, Slayers to have skirmish and ward tattoos. Yes, Slayers definitely need a ward save. I wouldn't even mind if it's purely a ward in the shooting phase. So a ward against shooting attacks, magic missiles and such. They don't need one in combat, because they're in combat, then they're already getting the glorious death that they seek. So I would be happy with that if it's just against shooting. That would be fine with me. Give them a 5+ ward, or even a 4+ ward against shooting. Wouldn't that be insane? Insanely good and insanely fun, which is what you want. Okay. Doomslayers as fanatics. Well, that's an interesting thought to end on. We'll let people ponder on that. Let me know what you thought of this game. If you've spotted any horrendous rules blunders as well in the comments, as usual. Let me know if my opponent cheated at all, so that then I can go and call them out on it, obviously. And yes, by the way, don't take that entirely seriously. There have been games where I've done battle reports and my opponents have forgotten a certain rule, and then half the comments have been calling them out for cheating. But I'm sure it wasn't intentional, especially in these friendly games. Okay, ending the stream. All that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.